Welcome back to Virtuous Woman TV. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Young Thug's interview on, I think it's called Big Facts Podcast. Listen, that channel grew so much with that interview. I think when I first saw them advertise the interview, it was like 129,000 subscribers. And I think now they're over 200,000 subscribers in just one conversation. And, it's just crazy how a lucky break or a single situation could literally change the direction of your life. You know what I mean? Like this one interview, just like with Shannon Sharpe and the Cat Williams interview. It's like so many things could spawn out of an opportunity. But anyways, this Young Thug whole situation, it really has my attention. I think there's a nostalgic element to it. You know what I mean? Just I don't know. It's kind of like a heart of a gangster type of thing with me. I used to deal with a lot of street guys. You know what I mean? And just listen to him and Mariah the Scientist talking, and then just the polarity of their personalities, with her being, a suburban girl or whatever you want to call it, and him being a street guy. I don't know. It's just reminiscent of the way I grew up and the way that I used to have relationships. I was talking about it the other day in one of my videos about, I was looking at this personality type guy, and they were talking about the archetype of people, in which they call me the pioneer, and it was saying like, oh, you gotta start going after gangsters, and I was like, what? I was like, is this a thing? Like, how is this written in a book? It was trying to tell me that, I would be best with a leader or a warrior, but it was saying I end up with gangsters and I was just like, wow, that's interesting, because literally, I've had a lot of relationships with street dudes, and I really don't know why. There's nothing street about me. I'm straight. I don't know. I'm just a square girl. I'm a good girl. I call myself Virtuous Woman TV, the anatomy of a good girl, and I take pride in it. Because I just think it's unique, especially in the times that we're living in. A lot of people believe in the value and the benefits of being bad, and I don't know. For me, I've always saw the bad girls as wanting what the good girls have, and even if they try to gaslight you and make you like them, they want to be you. They want to talk like you. They want the respect you command. They want your nerve. They want your confidence. They don't have all that inside of them. You know what I mean? But anyway, so just listening to him, is just kind of giving me nostalgia over dealing with those type of people back in the day. I'm a grown ass woman now, okay? So this is the past we speak of. I definitely ain't messing with no street dudes at this day and age, right? But anyway, so he did an interview on this podcast, and he basically started out talking about his family life and growing up. And he talked about how his mother had 11 kids, and, they kind of grew up in the struggle. And his dad had a total of 15 kids. And, he talked about some of the little discrepancies in his family. And then he went on to talk about his relationships, his friendships, and just pretty much his mentality. But what I came to understand about Young Thug is that, there's a reason why people do all of what they do and feel all of what they feel. The internet is so, it just dumbed down, you know what I mean? That they just hear something and they immediately form an opinion, just to be able to talk. But they don't really have a lot of substance behind what it is they're saying or what it is they're feeling about somebody. It's like, oh, this week, we're deciding that Young Thug's a snitch. Oh, next week we're deciding that Gunna's a snitch. Oh, this week, and they just run with these collective narratives, and they don't feel like they have to justify why they feel the way they feel. You know what I mean? But you're dealing with people. You're dealing with human lives. You're dealing with humanity. And I think if it's worth commenting on at all, that you should put your heart in it, you know what I mean, or your mind into it, or else you should just reserve your comments for yourself, because people are just much too careless. So Young Thug talks about, growing up with his mom and dad and basically not being able to be in touch with his emotions. There were things that he was observing as a child, ways that he felt, but his scapegoat or his outlet was staying happy, or what he thought was happiness, right? He used the vibration of happiness to not allow anything to affect him. He used it as his protection or his guide or the energy that he needed inside of himself to keep going and to push the further heights over things and situations that he couldn't control. You know, one thing that he recounted was going to his auntie's house and seeing how she didn't have but 3 kids and she was able to maintain control over her household. You know, she didn't have her kids all wild all over the place like his mom did. They didn't have a bunch of roaches. They had food. And so when Young Thug and his mom and all of her 11 kids would come over, it was like a burden. It was like, oh my God, like get these people out of here. And it's funny because he can look at that as an adult in hindsight and say, yeah, I get it. Like, you know, don't be bringing your dusty ass kids over here like y'all got hella shit going on. But as a kid, that's something that you feel. It's not something that you think or that you can make sense out of. And I think that's lost on a lot of adults when it comes to children, is that they don't feel that children are perceiving their environment. Adults are just moving and doing them, and they're affecting people with every move they make, every sound they make, every conversation that they have. And some kids, you know, I was a kid that was taking it in. I was a kid that was, you know, listening to conversations about my mom from my aunties and forming the same type of opinions about my mom as they had. And because they were there and she wasn't, I kind of lightweight turned on her in favor of what they were saying because they were there and she wasn't. You know what I mean? And so you grow up automatically being in the middle of things or being in two sides of things, riding the fence on things, understanding both sides, whatever it is, just things that should not be in your realm as a child. You know what I mean? A lot of adults think of protection in terms of violence and keeping people off the streets and keeping people from being sexually abused, but they don't protect or preserve the innocence of children. You know what I mean? They just live adult lives, have adult conversations, express adult feelings in front of children and don't give any context or explanation. You know what I mean? So for him, he felt, you know, that he wasn't wanted. You know, him, his mom and her clan, they weren't wanted. They weren't special enough. You know what I mean? They were a burden, you know. So I feel like his internal attitude to himself was that he never wanted anybody else to feel the way he felt. You know what I mean? I feel like he subconsciously wanted to build an organization around being the center focus or the central piece, because then he wouldn't be able to be kind of tolerated, right? Your auntie, your family, they all tolerating y'all. It's 11 of y'all, but it's no specific individual or appreciative attention surrounding your presence because it's a burden. You know what I mean? Nobody's looking at you like you're a special Young Thug. No, you're just 8 of 11. You know what I mean? You know, so he talked about how he never had a chance to process his emotions, and his thing was just to keep going. You know what I mean? And so he tried to stay in a vibration of positivity and happiness and being upbeat in order to persevere. But really, he was just tricking himself, and he was kind of out of touch with the amount of sadness or anger or feelings that he had about some of the things that he's experienced. And believe it or not, this is a lot of dudes' stories. A lot of dudes, especially street dudes, do not have an outlet for the type of conversations that they need to have. You know what I mean? And like I said, with me having a history of dating them, I get it, because I'm the person that they have those conversations with. You know, those deep conversations where they're trying not even to work out their mind, they're just talking. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny because if you really give a man your attention, you know what I mean? I mean, no phones, no scrolling, no talking over, just really just listening, they will go on and on and on and on and on. And then you will kind of understand them as a person. And it's a hard position for a woman. It's hard for a woman when you understand a man, because with the amount of experiences they have, there's a certain amount of issues or demons attached to that. And you get stuck in a dilemma of damn, like, why should I have to tolerate X, Y, and Z? But your understanding and your compassion kind of makes you, you know what I mean? And that's why this day and age, you really have to be careful of the kind of conversations that you have, or even the information that you allow people to share with you, right? Because that is a form of bonding, and it is a form of intimacy, and it goes deeper than having sex. And just like you can wait 90 days for sex, you can wait 90 days to hear a nigga's life story. You know what I mean? Because that sharing cements relationships a lot deeper than physical contact, right? So Young Thug basically was out of touch with the way that he was feeling about some of the things that was happening around him. And so he's saying that, you know, when he was in jail and he was talking on the phone, you know, he had a lot of anger over what he was facing, but also he had a lot of time, right? Because you got to understand, street dudes, niggas with freedom, whatever you want to call it, they also got things like drugs. They got alcohol. They got lean. They got bitches. They got a lot of things that distract them from feeling what it is that they really feel, you know, even if it's anger, right? Some of the anger that you could feel, you can fucking tear the hole in the earth, you know, from the depth of those feelings. But there's not always a positive outlet for that. Sometimes you rely on certain relationships. Like he said, sometimes you just have to persevere. Sometimes you can't acknowledge certain emotions because of how you'll explode. Now, as a woman, my tool has primarily been intellectualizing those feelings, right? Or compartmentalizing them, trying to make sense out of them, reading my way through them. As a man who's more action oriented and just wants to get something off of him, he's going to smoke weed, or he's going to drink, or he's going to do drugs, right? Both of us, either way it goes, have the same intention, which is to avoid the pain of reality, or really telling ourselves the truth about what's going on with the people around us. You know what I mean? Or accepting the fact that what should be love is not love. You know what I mean? Or what should be due you, what should be owe you, the loyalty that you've earned for the way that you put in, there should be a certain result from that. And it's not that. And regardless of how you feel, you got to keep going. And so it's like you do something with that energy, you do something with those thoughts, and you do something with those feelings, but you don't do the right things with them. You avoid them. And then comes time for your soul to elevate, right? Young Thug's soul elevation came through his being in jail, right? Where all the distractions were removed. Mine came through a breakup. And in those times where you don't have other outlets comes the purge. And in that purging, all of that anger, all of that resentment, all of that acknowledging of, you know, the things that you took, the things that you let go, the things that you didn't get, all of that comes rushing at you. And it's not easy. You know, so I can only imagine what it was like for him to deal with that from behind bars, you know, with only a phone conversation as an outlet for that. You know, me, I had nature. I could go take a walk in the mountains. I live in California. We have a lot of mountains out here. I could scream to the top of my lungs, and I did. I went through a horrible temper phase. I was very agitated but it wasn't about the incident that triggered all of this, right? So in Young Thug's situation, it's the incident is him being in jail, or, you know, having somebody so-called snitch on him. It's just that the incident, it triggers an avalanche of emotions and hidden resentments and hidden bitterness and betrayals and things that you've avoided looking at in life because of the pain that it would bring. It floods you. It floods you, and you have to deal with that shit. You know what I mean? So I completely understand how he was on the phone and having conversations, and his conversations wasn't even bad. That's why I hate social media, because it's so shallow and boring. You know, he wasn't snitching on nobody. He wasn't talking up under nobody's clothes. Okay, he called Glorilla ugly. I love Glorilla because she's a girl's girl, and I think she's one celebrity that really has it right. But let's be honest, the girl was chopped. She was trailer trash. And that's a reason why she has it right. It's a reason why she has a certain humility to her personality, and she's not running around trying to give bitches her ass to kiss like some of these other studio made hoes, you know what I mean, who don't even have talent, but just walk into shit because of the way that they look. Glorilla didn't have all that. Glorilla was bony. She had shark teeth. Her eyes was far apart. She was chopped. You know what I mean? So if he says that and it's true, it in a private conversation with this girl, even on a recorded call that could be leaked, he still didn't go on Twitter and tweet it. He didn't go on a podcast and say it. He said it in a conversation that many of us have. My own friends talk shit about me. I don't really talk shit about my friends, but that's just because I'm not much of a gossiper. But if I gotta say something, I'ma say it. You know what I mean? And that's to be expected, but it's not something to be mad at. It's human nature. You know what I mean? I don't think that was a big deal. I just don't. I think that girls want Mariah to be responsible for being fake to Glorilla. And I mean, come on now. Like, people are just incredible. Right? And then so after that, he's calling out all these rappers. He's like, Kendrick Lamar made it. He ain't put nobody on. And Gunna made it, and not Gunna, Andre 3000 made it, and he ain't put nobody on. And I always try to put people in position, but see, Young Thug doesn't realize that even as good people, good-hearted person, because I think that Young Thug is a good-hearted person, but the bottom line is, when you do good things out of a sense of neglect within yourself, meaning that you're doing something because it was never done for you, or you're overcompensating for something in childhood, you don't get the good results and the good karma for that, because you're doing it in default mode. You're not doing it with intentions. You're doing it to nurture or to nurse the little boy or the little girl inside of you, right? So instead of you being able to command the loyalty that comes from making a conscientious decision, what you're doing is commanding the experiences that bring you in touch with what you're hiding by overcompensating and doing so much for others, right? Young Thug was clearly a person that tried to give people what he didn't have, right? He didn't have a family where he was the core, or he was responsible, so he was trying to basically put this group of people together. And he was the nucleus, and when you dealing with power structures, people are going to be manipulative. That's the only way to bring groups of people together. It's a sad, bitter truth about life and human nature. So don't think if Young Thug was the head of a group, a gang, or whatever you want to call it, that he's never going to manipulate, or he's never going to turn people against each other, because the goal or the key to them being in charge and being able to run things relies on them being the most liked and the most wanted. It doesn't matter how you niggas feel about each other. I need all of you guys vying for me so I can run this shit the way that I'm trying to run this shit. That's just the way it goes. John Gotti, the best of them, any group holder is living this existence. So no, it doesn't surprise me that he's manipulating the emotions of others, or he's venting to one part of the group about the other part of the group. It's all par for the course, right? But his goal was to build a loyal organization of people who he could trust. And listen, trust comes with a certain amount of control, right? That he could build. And I understand his pain in saying that he put his time in that, he put his effort in that, he put his energy in that with pure and raw love, as pure as it could get for him, because remember, his love is also restricted and constricted by his experiences that he had as a child. You know what I mean? So it's like when you do things out of love, but inside you're harboring such a bitter, resentment towards a lot of different things, your love is not that pure, but it's as pure as it could be. If it's not pure, it's not because of your intention or who you are. It's just that it hasn't been purified. It hasn't been tested. It hasn't been trialed by fire, right? So he's going along and he's trying to build this crew. He invested a lot in Gunna. What he saw in Gunna, I don't know, right? He says Gunna is highly intelligent. He talks about Gunna being quiet so that people could write their own story, which is also a form of manipulation, right? When you have somebody that, because you are charismatic or because you are the leader, they let you go out and do the talking and do the mascotting, and they up under your nose behind your back. You see that a lot. Even when you go to the church and you see the pastor and then you see the deacon, and they say the deacon is the pastor of the people. The pastor's in control of the church, but the deacon is in control of the people. And so once you got the people, you just a mascot. You know what I mean? So that's why I say you can't be giving people too much real estate when it comes to your organization, because they end up having more power than you, even though they're not the face, right? Young Thug was a face, and he can blame his ego for that, or his star power, his charisma, or whatever that is, but it allows people to see him as the bad guy, right? Because he's tall and because he's Young Thug, and Gunna is just this, short, fat dude who they like to call gay, but they're not realizing, what's inside of him, right? Young Thug gonna have the same issue with Mariah the Scientist, you know what I mean? So it's gonna be another test for him to see if he's really understanding and he's getting a lesson. But I think the more he purges and the more he comes in contact with his real emotions and his real feelings, then he'll be able to see things more clearly. But with her, she also plays that quiet, reserved, unassuming role, you know what I mean? But every time she's out photographed with him, she looks like he's dragging her to do something she doesn't want to do. She keeps this pained expression on her face. She pretends that she wants to talk to people and he's rushing her. All of that shit is strategic. You know what I mean? It's a setup, so that when she does need to get out of this relationship or situation, she already has women thinking that she was in some type of abuse or unequally yoked situation, despite the fact that he already has a decades long established career in the music industry. You know what I mean? And for whatever reason, she gave up her career. If she was in bioscience or whatever she was in, she wanted to be a singer. You know what I mean? But again, he has to think how she's pretty much playing the same way that Gunna did. Right? I keep it quiet. I let people write their own stories. I don't present myself like someone who's capable of making my own decision. She doesn't defend herself against what people say about her and Young Thug, because she doesn't want to lose the women, because it's an ace in the hole, right? So I feel like he's gonna end up experiencing the same type of betrayal through that relationship, especially if he thinks of that as his outlet. Or a place where he can, because they're trauma bonding. Look what they're going through. They get together. He's already in jail. He's emotionally dumping all of his, grievances with his life, his homeboys on the phone. Then they get out of jail, and now he's going through this. All of this is putting a lot of stress and tension on that relationship. On top of the fact that he got 8 kids, umpteen baby mamas. It just doesn't even make sense for her to be with him. You know what I mean? Other than the fact that there's a bond there. And like I said, that bond comes through emotions and trauma. And it comes through her feeling like she knows him through his storytelling. And it's true, details about that person. But it's a different type of knowledge. You know what I mean? It's knowledge where you have to be responsible or forgiving or graceful with a nigga, even when certain things don't make you happy because you have too much understanding, like I talked about earlier in the video. But anyway, so Thug built this crew, and he was in charge. He was in control of it. He was the daddy. You know what I mean? And he loved his children. He invested in his children. He poured into his children. And like all people who need you, once the void is gone, the babies are going to want to fly. And he was not interested in people who wanted to fly away from him. He was interested in that loyalty, that reciprocation, that he's been kind of craving. Not people who were going to get rid of him like his auntie because it was 11 of them and it was too much. No, he created an abundance. You know, he removed people's obstacles and he removed their problems, you know, to make it comfortable for them to be there for him and to be loyal. He took every one of their, you know, problems off of their plate so that he would never be perceived as the problem. You know what I mean? And to see that not work out for himself, I'm sure was very crushing. And like I said, when you have to sit with that realization and you have no escape, like drugs or alcohol or sex or even making music, you have to confront that pain and that anger. You know what I mean? And even still, when you listen to his phone calls, he's doing it through laughter. You know, he's like, these niggas ain't shit, these niggas hell. You know what I mean? Because there's a certain nostalgic irony in the shit too. You know, it's not like you just raging. Yeah, you do have your moments where you screaming and shouting, but it's more like, damn, like, ain't that a bitch? You know what I mean? Now, he, you know, what I found interesting was his resentment towards Kendrick Lamar and Andre 3000. And he's like, man, these niggas is on. They ain't never looked out for nobody else. But it's like, you looked out for everybody and look at you now. You know, there's a different type of self-respect and boundaries that come with people who work hard on themselves as well as their craft. And Young Thug only worked hard at people. You know, so he doesn't have the self-respect that Kendrick Lamar and Andre 3000 have. And he looks at it as if it's selfishness. But really, it's not. It's just that they have more self-respect and more boundaries over the work that they've done on themselves spiritually, mentally, physically. Young Thug didn't make that type of investment in himself. He invested his external resources into trying to secure love from other people. He never focused on the spiritual aspect of loving himself or unraveling his own issues that would make him more discerning or more discriminating about the amount of people that he came across or that he shared energy with or that he brought into his life. He just wanted to build a family. You know what I mean? He didn't vet. That was not important. He thought that the money would do the talking, that the money would secure things that his, you know, that he couldn't secure on the back end. You know what I mean? But he wasn't fully focused. You know, so his resentment and anger towards Andre 3000 and Kendrick Lamar, who are very much the same type of person, have to do with them being real men in his eyes. Young Thug talked a lot about being a real man. You know what I mean? So I know that he has this certain spiritual integrity about himself. Even if he's not there in his strivings, in his view of himself and what he wants to be, he wants to be a righteous person. You know what I mean? But you have a lot of things that can stand in the way of that. And it's a lot of personal hangups. It's just like a woman wanting to be a good woman or wanting to change her life and manifest her life. I even went through that. Like you have things about yourself, person, that can stand in the way of you materializing your highest version of yourself. And it's like until you confront and deal with that side of yourself, you can't. You're going to attract more of what you fear, more of what you're trying to control in the situation. You know what I mean? He attracted his greatest fears. He attracted the exact same pains that he thought growing into what he believed was a man's man would protect him and keep him from experiencing. And it did the opposite. It brought on more of that because he's not dealing with the core issue. You know what I mean? The core issue of how, you know, inadequate he may have felt as a child. Without going too far. I don't want to psychoanalyze a nigga too much because I know that people don't like that. You know, and I'm a natural psychologist, a spiritual psychologist, whatever you want to call it. It's just, it's who I am. It's in my DNA. You know, but I have to learn how to be, you know, careful with my words and not say everything that comes to mind, especially unsolicited. Right. But there's clearly hangups that he has there. Right. And it's like money can't solve all things. But at the core of him, he wants a righteous situation. He wants to be appreciated for the man that he is. he wants other people to be like him. He feels like he's a leader and an example, but the energy space from where he's moving is what's the problem. It's the background. It's the spirituality behind it that convolutes all of his physical and tangible efforts, right? Kendrick Lamar and Andre 3000, like I said, they have a certain boundary about themselves that allows their selfishness, or what he perceives as selfishness, not to be perceived by the world the same way he perceives it. Whereas he's giving and abundant and jovial and looking out for other people and sacrificing, yet he gets the title of being the selfish one. You see how that works? It's crazy, you know what I mean? But he could learn a lot from them. You know what I mean? Because for all he gave, look what was given back to him, right? I completely understand his gripes with the people that he was complaining about or talking shit about, because a lot of it had to do with ethics, and a lot of it had to do with his ideologies about what good people are and what goodness is. But he's not realizing that his definition of goodness is heavily influenced by his experience with just the opposite. You know what I mean? And sometimes as a good person, even as a good girl, a virtuous woman, what is good is not, it's not good. It's not like it's not what you think it is. What is good is being authentic and honest and risking the vulnerability of explaining your hurts, which he did. I don't see how people can't see it that way. Like he explained his hurt. He wants to know why. It's a legitimate question. You know what I mean? But he's asking the wrong person. He has to talk to his maker about why. Any answer Gunna gives him will never be good enough. And I do think Gunna should have a conversation with him, but he needs to ask God why. Why do I keep giving? Why do I keep sacrificing? Why do people not respect or appreciate the love that I give them? Who am I nothing to them? That's what he needs to be asking. Am I nothing? His anger a lot of times is at God, right? But Gunna, he wants an answer from him. He wants to know why you did that. Why you folded. Like why? Now, from Gunna's perspective, maybe he was like, listen, I don't got shit to do with y'all got going on. I'm guilty by association. I'm not sacrificing my life for the fuck shit you niggas got going on. I don't know what the potential of this situation is, and I'm not trying to find out. I don't have the tools to deal with it. And that's a level of vulnerability that Gunna will have to talk about. But hiding behind silence and exercise and positivity, that's not fair either. You know what I mean? They do need a conversation. They do need a one-on-one. And it's just feelings that need to be expressed, accountability that needs to be had, and somebody letting you know that you are important enough for them to give you closure. Gunna needs to give Young Thug closure about this shit. He needs to account for it. You know what I mean? I made a video about closure. And how not giving people closure, you have people out there that are angry with you, ruminating about you, thinking about you, draining your energy, throwing daggers at you, having vengeance against you over conversations never had, feelings not expressed, block buttons going up. And sometimes you just got to give people they round, and let them have that conversation. You know what I mean? Like I said, as much as you can, try not to end things in emotional ways where there's open end. Try to say, I try to make my apologies. Like, ain't nothing gonna change, but I'm sorry for how it ended or how we got here. But that's a level of closure, right? As long as you're not playing with nobody and going back and forth with it, it is what it is. The conversation was had. Young Thug kind of went from being cool with these niggas one day to, a nigga, so-called snitching, and the rest is history. So you have to understand his feelings and his emotions and how that shit triggered. But Gunna is still not responsible for the whole of Young Thug's life, and he wasn't the source of the first betrayal. And that's where Young Thug needs to get to the bottom of. It's not about Gunna. Gunna can have that conversation. He can give you that closure, but you're going to run into another Gunna, like I said, in Mariah for one. But you got to meet that final boss, though, which is you. Which is you. You got to look yourself in the mirror and have that, have that good vulnerable moment where you talk about all the pettiness that, diminished you, and that you had to hold that shit-eating grin and pretend to be happy and optimistic just to give yourself the energy and the courage to keep going over shit that make your ass jump off a bridge. I understand it. I know niggas is a conversation away from suicide. I talk to so many of them, so I totally understand it. But you're here, you know what I mean? And you have persevered, and you young, which means that the work is really just beginning. You know what I mean? We have a long way to go as human beings, but it gets better. You know what I mean? It gets so much better when your intentions about how you want to live your life get clarified. You know what I mean? Then you'll have those same boundaries as, Andre 3000 and Kendrick Lamar, that you admire but you envy. You know what I mean? But anyways, this is my woman's perspective on what I heard from Young Thug. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, turn your notification bells on, but most importantly, support me on my Etsy store, Soft Souls, SOFSOLES. I got some bomb ass moisturizing foot balm. Listen, if you like soft feet that smell hella good, or you like that for your lady, or you like that for your man, this is a product like no other. Okay, you really don't want to miss out. But until then, go ahead and turn me up, like this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.